God, that we are standing on top of ground, and ground is not on top of us.
Amen.
It is good to see you all on this morning. It's good to be seen because that means we were blessed to have another day to get it right with the Lord. And so we want to say to our guests that you are our honored guests. We are happy that you are here with us on this morning. We hope that you enjoy the services and we'll come again at your next convenient time. If we may, before we get started, it's good to see Sister Essie Gaines here with us on this morning. And I think we should stand up and give her a great big God bless you, because I believe on this morning will be her last service with us. She got one more service, I'm sorry, but she's getting ready to go to Maryland. But anytime we are able to give someone their flowers while they are here, we should take every opportunity to do that. So we want to say to Sister Gaines that we love you, and we send a good, real big God bless you. Let's give it up for our ministers, Brother Taylor and Brother Brown, for the wonderful work that they are doing here. And as I said, at the 8 o'clock service, I'm thankful for them for the love and the support and the mentorship they have poured into my ministry. And then to everybody else who is in protocol, who wanted to be called and I didn't call, God bless you too also. You know, when in the church we get to start calling names, you know, somebody will pull you to the side and say, well, why didn't you thank me? Well, thank you and God bless you. Amen. If you will, please turn your Bibles to Acts chapter 20. And the verse is going to be 7 through 12. And we will be reading from the New King James Version. We want to thank those who was able to join us for the 8 o'clock service, if some are still here. We had a great service for it to be an early service in our first service, so we thank God for you. And then those who are joining us with us now, also thank you. Acts chapter 20, and the verses is going to be 7 through 12, and we will be reading from the New King James Version. All have it, say amen. Amen. And the Bible reads, Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together. And in a window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him. Amen. Now when he had come up, he had broken bread and eaten, and taught a long while. Even till daybreak, he departed. And they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted. Amen. I would like to speak to you from the message of 2020 Vision, Youth in Focus, with a subtitle of Refocusing a Generation. Amen. You may have a seat. Amen. 2020 Vision, Youth in Focus, Refocusing a Generation. As Brother Taylor and Brother Brown says, at times what I'm about to say, with the Lord's permission, many of you will hear such wise that you will be reviewing what you know rather than learning what you know not. I say that because when we hear about Acts 20 and verse 7, the first thing that comes to our mind is the Lord's Supper. But that's not what we're going to talk about on this morning. We're going to just simply talk about some things that we as a church need to put our focus on.
Come on. All right.
Focus can be defined as a center of activity, attraction, or attention. It is a directed emphasis. It is not whether or not our young people are focused, but the question is, what are they focused on?
All right.
To refocus means to change the emphasis, to change the direction of. And so the goal of our message on this morning is to change the emphasis or the direction on the things that our young folks and even some of us seasoned members are focused on.
All right.
Today we read a story about a young man who was focused on the wrong thing. We learned in verse 9 that this young man name was Eutychus. And the first thing that we learn about Eutychus in his story is that he was in a promising environment. In verse 7, it says that on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them. That sentence right there shows us that he was in a promising environment because he was around the right people, he was around the disciples, and he was in a place of God. Amen. We all know that the best place for young people to be is in the place of God.
Amen.
Most parents bring their children to church because it can be and it is a promising environment for their children to grow up the correct way. I've learned that wherever the Spirit of God is, that's the right place for a person to be.
Amen.
But sometimes we get caught up in some things and we go places where we know the Spirit is not there. And we say things like, I'm going to take the Spirit with me, God. I'm going to take you up in this club. I'm going to take you to this juke joint, Lord, because they need you in that Spirit. And we know that the Spirit is not at Jim's place. As you can see on the board. But we have to understand that when we come into this sanctuary with God's people, we should only be focused on one thing, and that is to praise and worship God. We shouldn't be focused on what somebody have on. I'm not focused about you talking to me or talking about me. I'm not here for you to focus on you gossiping about me. The only focus that we ought to be doing is to praise and worship God. Besides, for some of us, we don't know what God has brought us through. You don't understand why somebody is praising the way they are praising. You don't understand what they went through on last Sunday through last Saturday to get them here on today. Amen. So every time that we come into the Word of God, into this place of God, we ought to just be focusing on God. So we see that he's around the right people, he's in the right place, and he is around the right preacher. Out of all the preachers that Paul can be around, that Eutychus can be around, he gets to be around Paul. This is the same Paul who laid the foundation for spreading the gospel to all the world. So the question is to Eutychus, you're hearing the right preacher, you're around the right people, you are in the place of God, but how is it, Eutychus, that you are still disconnected from God?
Well,
and I thought about this. The truth of the matter is that a lot of people can be raised in the church. They can leave the church and forget about what they learned in the church.
Come on.
That's why I'm happy for people like my grandfather, who was able to instill in me at a young age the importance about coming to church, the importance about worshiping God. Because when I got older, I tried to leave, but it was just something that drug me back to the house of the Lord.
All right, come on.
In Proverbs 22 and verse 6, the Bible says that we ought to train a child up in a way that he should go, so when he grow old, he shall not depart from it.
Yes, sir.
A tree nursery is a place that grows trees. If I can get Brother Elisha the third, Brother Marcus, and Brother Joey up here. I want to use y'all for a second here. Y'all can come on up here so that the members can see. Y'all give these young men a round of applause. Amen. One of them was about to fall asleep, and I called him right at the right time. Praise. Don't be Eutychus now. Don't go to sleep on me. A tree nursery. A tree nursery is a place where they grow little baby trees. The thing about this little baby tree is that he cannot stay in the tree nursery forever.
Well,
at a certain point, this little baby tree is going to be dug up. And it's going to be put into a new environment that it never been exposed to. It's going to be placed in new soil that it never has been around. Y'all follow me now.
Come on, Mom.
The thing that I like about this is that I thank God for those who invented the 2x4s. Because with the 2x4s, what they done is that they placed a 2x4 on the left side of the tree. They then placed a 2x4 on the right side of the tree because they understood that this little tree can't take the winds or the waves of this world. So anytime that this little tree gets to shaking to the right, this 2x4 can hold them up. Whenever you want to get shaken to the left, that 2x4 can hold them up. If you don't get the analogy of what I'm saying, thank y'all. If y'all don't get the analogy of what I'm saying is you ought to be thanking God for the 2x4s in your life. You ought to be thanking for those people who was able to stand on the side of you and just simply say, I got you.
I got you. That's up.
So the text says that he's in a promising environment. But in this promised environment, he has a prototypical experience. What that word means is that he simply means that it's an individual that exhibits the essential features of a later type, a standard, or a typical example. In other words, Eutychus is prototype of what most youth feel in church. The experience is typical of the example of what the average teenager's perspective of church is. In verse 7 through 9, the Bible says that now, on the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached, ready to depart on the morrow and continue his message until midnight.
All right.
In verse 8, it says that there were many lamps in the upper room that were gathered together. And verse 9 says, and in that window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. These three verses prove that Eutychus was uninterested in the preaching that was going on at that particular time.
Come on.
He was in the right place. He was around the right people. He was listening to the right preacher, but he was not interested in what he was not interested in what Paul had to say. There are three aspects when it comes to trying to send a message. You have the messenger, you have the message, and you have the receiver. The problem is oftentimes the messenger will send a message, but it won't be received. So then what the messenger does, he blames the receiver for not receiving the message. In other words, when we are trying to spread the gospel to our young people, you in the 60s, and all you talk about is the 70s, and you wonder why a teenager in 2018 can't connect with you.
All right.
Not only was he uninterested in the preaching, but he was in an uncomfortable place. It says that Paul preached, and he preached until midnight. As I said earlier, we got here at 8 o'clock this morning. Imagine being here until midnight.
All right, Mom.
Somebody said mercy. Some of us can't sit from 10 to 11:30. Let alone Brother Taylor, Brother Brown preaching to us until midnight. The bad thing about that is Paul probably lost time because they probably didn't have a clock in the church. And so Paul just preached and just kept on preaching. And I know Eutychus was like, bro, you invited me to church. You told me to come hear the word.
Come on.
But I didn't come here to sit here and be here for this long. Also, if you look at verse 6, in verse 6 of the NLT and the Message version, it mentioned that during this time, it's the Passover, which leads me to believe that it's springtime. So not only it's springtime, but it said that many lamps, Sister Pam Williams, many lamps are burning. Said that many lamps are burning. We know that heat rises up, and the bad thing about it, he's around a whole lot of you folks, church folks that is. And so we know that he was uncomfortable because he moved himself from an uncommitted position he moved himself from amongst the saints to an uncommitted position. What I've learned that oftentimes is that because we are uncomfortable where we are in life, we decide to get up, move our seat from the will of God to the windows of life. So much so that we are now in an uncomfortable position.
Make it plain.
It's good.
Just like this. Eutychus' body was in the church, but his eyes was in the world. His body was where he needed to be, but his eyes was where he wanted to be. So let me just break it down for you like this. Eutychus is torn between the Bible and the blunt. He's torn between the spirit and sex.
Come on.
He's torn between the church and the club. And he's torn between the word and the world. It's because he's in an uncommitted position, because he's uncomfortable in the place that he's at in his life at this time. In 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15, the Bible tells us not to love the things in this world. So he was in the church physically, but was looking out into the world. And that's where he wanted to be. But you can't allow the lure of this world to remove you from the wheel to the window sill. There's an advertisement term called bait and switch. Bait and switch is pretty much saying that I'm going to show you one thing, but I'm going to give you another. The bait and switch is you're sitting at home and you're minding your business. You're probably full, you're watching TV, and up comes a Burger King commercial. And with this Burger King commercial, you see that they have the Whopper, sesame seed buns, tomatoes, lettuce, peppers, mayonnaise, the whole 9 yards. You got the Whopper. And then what they do is they try to lure you in by showing you the nice hot golden fries. They got the salt all on it. No, we don't need no more salt because that
High blood pressure.
high blood pressure. There you go. Once they add those fries, and you gonna need something to wash it down. You can't just eat the Whopper and the fries and not have nothing to wash it down. And you know the Coke look good because even the Coke itself is sweating. You can see that the sweat is running down from the Coke, and it's bubbling and it's fizzing. And so you get up and you say, you know what? I'm gonna get ready to go to Burger King, and I'm gonna order me a #1 with cheese on the board.
All right.
You ain't no Whopper lover if you don't get your Whopper on the board.
Right.
Split right down the middle.
Right down the middle.
It ain't no Whopper unless you get it cut in half. By the time you pick it up and eat it, everything else gonna fill in the paper or in your lap. Now you're upset. You gotta get it on the board. So then you go to Burger King, you tell the cashier, let me get a #1 with cheese on the board. Thank you for coming to Burger King, sir. You have a nice day. And then you get home or you get in your car and your meal looks like this.
Look at it, look at it, look at it.
You don't have no sesame seeds on your bun. It looks like somebody probably done bit half of your sandwich. Your fries look like it's being reheated and your Coke is now flat. Why is it that? Why is it? Because it's a bait and switch, young people. Understand, the world is going to show you one thing. Lil Wayne and all these guys, you can't wake up in a Bugatti. You just don't wake up in a Bugatti. The videos that you're looking at, the jewelry that you're saying, all that's fake. See, the world want to show you one thing, young people. But then when you think that you're going to get what they have, you get this. Whatever that may be. The part that gets me is that the whole time that Eutychus is sitting in the windowsill, not one adult says anything to him. Nobody ever went over to him and say, Eutychus, get off the windowsill. He is sitting on the windowsill and the congregation is unconcerned about his position. He was not attracted to what was going on because he was not attached to any adults. Nobody cared about Eutychus in the windowsill. Everybody saw him sitting there, but nobody had told him to get off.
All right.
And see, the problem is, just like Eutychus' situation, we wait until she's pregnant to start talking about her when we knew she was having sex and tried to avoid it at that point. We knew, or we wait till he go to prison to start talking about him when we knew he was out here slinging drugs and killing people and robbing people. Then it's at that time we want to start talking about him. We wait till somebody is on drugs to talk about them when they knew, or when we knew they had issues in their life. But I'm here to testify and tell you, don't wait for me to fall and then talk about me while I'm down. Don't put me down, don't gossip about me, don't spread rumors about me. Tell me to get off the windowsill. They was unconcerned about his position. They were unaware about to what he was doing, as if they didn't realize that if Eutychus fall from the 3rd story, he could die. We need some people in the house of God that are some window closers. You may ask, what is a window closer? It's simply this. A window closer is a person that says, I may not be able to get you off the windowsill, but I could come and close the window. Older sisters, you see our young sisters checking this young man out, 6-pack, biceps, good hair, light skin or dark skin or whatever, dreads, whatnot. You need to go close that young lady's window and say, baby, that ain't what you need. Older brothers, we need to help our young men out. Just because we see a young lady walk in with a short skirt, high heels on, walking down the aisle, we need to go close that window and say, young man, that's not what you want. Y'all ain't got to preach back to me. I know I'm telling the truth, so I'm going to preach to myself. Amen, like so all. But I know you're preaching without raising your voice. Y'all ain't got to talk to me. Y'all ain't got to talk to me. So we first see that he's in a promising environment. We see that he has a prototypical experience. And number 3, in verse number 9, it says that he was overcome by sleep. As Paul continues preaching, he falls down from the 3rd story and was taken up dead. Eutychus' name means lucky one. So could it be that he was depending too much on luck and sat in the windowsill too long? So you have to understand that when you are in a place too long, you can end up falling in that place. That's why you have to be careful when you become comfortable in sin, because you may get away with it for a season, but eventually it will catch up with you.
Well,
The Bible says that he was overtaken by sleep, and then he fell out the window. And there are 5 stages of sleep. The first stage is the beginning of the sleep cycle. It's when you go back and forth between little sleep and alertness. This is usually someone whose head is bobbing back and forth on the church pew.
yes, sir.
And then when you tap them, the first thing they say, I'm not sleeping.
All right.
They done shook the whole pew because they bobbing and weaving. And you touch them and say, hey, I ain't sleeping. Stage 2 says it's when your body temperature begins to cool down and your heart rate rises. Stage 3 is when you transition from light sleep to deep sleep. Stage 4 is when you used to TT in the bed and you sleepwalk. It's like your body is not alert, but you're still moving and you're unaware of the pitfalls that are in front of you.
Well,
And stage 5 is rapid eye movement. In other words, it's the deepest stage of sleep. Brain activity increases, but your muscles are paralyzed. And so when I thought about the 5 stages of sleep, I thought about the 5 stages of sin.
come on.
Stage 1 is when you go back and forth with little sin and alertness. Somebody sees you in the club and the first thing you say, it wasn't me.
Well,
Stage 2 is when your body temperature decreases. You used to be on fire for the Lord, but now your fire is being cooled down by the world.
come on, man. Come on.
Number 3 is when you transition from light sin to lifestyle sin. How many people can admit that and say that I was what I thought was a small sin turned into a lifestyle?
Come on.
I thought I could handle it. I thought I had control over it, but now it has control over me. Stage 4 is what a lot of us are in. We came into the building in stage 4. We're sleepwalking on sin, and we are unaware of the pitfall that is in front of us.
All right.
And stage 5 is when you are so deep in your sin that you are alert about what you are doing, but you won't do anything about it.
Come on, Jamal.
There was a commercial, a Red Bull commercial, with a man, and he has a chain and a weight tied to his ankle. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to fly over the prison wall. And so he drinks the Red Bull, and the chain and the weight becomes weightless, and he's able to fly over the prison wall. So when I thought about that commercial, I said, you know what? I don't need a Red Bull to keep me awake or to keep me alert. But what I need is some red blood to stop me from sinning.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what prison you may be in, but when you are in Jesus, he'll give you wings. You ought to be giving God some praise on this morning for some of the prisons that he has released you from. Somebody ought to know that God will give you some wings. So now, in verse 10, it says that Eutychus is in a church full of people. It says that he falls out of the window, and the text only records one person going down to get him.
Well,
This speaks to me. In other words, the whole church, y'all people, look down on Brother on Eutychus. The whole church looked down on Eutychus. But it was Paul who went down to him.
well,
I say it was Paul who went down to him.
yes, sir.
It said that Paul went down to him. The church had pronounced him dead. The church counted him out.
Man,
He was a young person. And to some in the church, that don't matter to some people. If we want to be honest. We real relevant and ready, right?
amen,
Okay.
amen.
He was a young person who decided to do his own thing. And because Eutychus didn't do what we thought, the adults, what we thought he should be doing, or he didn't do, I'm not gonna say that. When the adults figured out that Eutychus didn't do what it was that he wanted to do, they pronounced him dead. They counted him out. They said he's dead, he's gone, he don't mean nothing to us. But it was Paul who still believed that he had life in him.
Come
The
on.
Bible tells us in Galatians 6 chapter 1 that when a brother is caught in a fault, you which are spiritual should restore such an one, and that's exactly what Paul did.
All right.
One thing I love about Paul is that he didn't forget that in Acts chapter 19 that he was left for dead.
That's right. That's right.
So he probably looked at this young man and he said to this young man that I remember when I was in your situation. I remember when they left me for dead. I remember when they talked about me. I remember when they gossiped about me. I remember when they doubted me and counted me out. Here is what got me after doing the study through the book of Acts. The book of Acts was written by Luke. This is the same Luke who wrote the gospel according to Luke.
All right.
But in Colossians chapter 4 and verses 14, it tells us that Luke was a physician. It says that Luke was a doctor. But then if we go back to Acts chapter 20 and read the entire chapter, you will notice that Luke is writing the book from a first person standpoint.
All right.
Which means he is present in this experience. So here's my question to Dr. Luke. Why are you so busy reporting instead of restoring?
Amen. Come on.
I ain't planning to get no amens on that.
Come on.
The question is, why are you so busy reporting instead of restoring? In other words, we deal with the same issue in the church today. So many people want to report, but not enough people want to restore.
Come on. Come on.
I say so many people want to report, but not enough people want to restore. Boy, you preaching out raising your voice. My point is, stop talking and stop gossiping about our young people. Stop talking and gossiping, not just about our young people, about each other. See, we need some people who's going to restore some people. Don't wait till somebody falls down and you start kicking them while they was down. If you see somebody having an issue, go to them. If you see me struggling, call me, text me, Facebook me. Don't go to Facebook and say, oh, y'all know Brother Butler did this. Don't be at the welcome desk saying, hey, you know Brother Butler did this. Don't be in the ladies' room or the men's room and say, hey, you know Brother Butler did this. Or don't try to pull Brother Taylor to the side and say, hey, Brother Taylor, why Brother Butler doing this? Because I hope he would do what Matthew tells us to do, to go to your... See, y'all don't want to hit on this one. Notice it says that Paul went down. It says that Paul was up 3 stories. And we also know that Paul was preaching. So Paul was probably in the pulpit preaching. And what happened was Paul inconvenienced himself and went down to him. Let me get man, come down. So as we can get this illustration, Eutychus has fell from the 3rd story. Paul is preaching in the pulpit. And again, remember, the adults didn't say anything to him. This young man is sitting in the windowsill, and everybody here, nobody said anything. But when he fell down, it says that Paul came down. And it says that Paul bent down. See, y'all didn't get that. That's a big shout. It says that Paul came down and Paul went down. And when Paul went down, what he did is check this young man to see if he was okay. As I said earlier, he didn't say, man, you just like your no good daddy. You're stupid. You shouldn't have been sitting in that doggone windowsill. Why you dumb? Why you do that, boy? I told your mama she should have did this. I told your daddy he should have did that. But what Paul did is he went down. He bent down. He picked the young man up.
Come on.
He walked with the young man. He said, hey, man, I remember when I was in your situation. I remember when somebody counted me out. I remember when he told me this and told me that. And that's what we need to do with our young people, because we wonder why when we look in the audience we don't have any young people. It's because we talk about them so much as if we never did anything. We wonder why we don't have any young people in the church, because we want to place them in our heaven or hell. Y'all might have a letter on me after this.
Well, come on.
But I don't care, because I got God's permission. We wonder why we can't bring young people to the church, because we want to abide by our laws.
Come on.
We want to make our traditions a law.
Come on.
We don't want to follow what God says. We're going to do what I say. When I was When I was a young guy, I get ready to close. Y'all ain't talking back to me.
Come on, son. Come on.
When I was a young guy, a little baby, we used to sing this nursery rhyme called Humpty Dumpty. Y'all remember Humpty?
Yeah, it's up.
All right. So if you remember Humpty, say that along with me. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty. Give a round of applause and love the party for Humpty Dumpty. Rest in peace, Humpty.
Pieces.
Pieces. I said rest in pieces. When I read this story, I saw the illustrator's interpretation of Humpty. It says that Humpty was an egg. So the question has to be that if you are an egg, why would you sit on a wall when you know you could fall and be broken? Why you decided to go to that place when you know that if you go in there, there's nothing but trouble in there, but you go and you do it anyway.
Come on, come on.
And what I realize is that this sanctuary is full of eggheads just like me. We have sat on plenty of walls that we knew that if I fall down, I'm going to hurt myself. But it still didn't stop us. Have you ever done something so stupid on purpose?
On purpose.
It says that when Humpty fell, he was broken, and all the king's horsemen and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. Let's think about this for a second. If an egg is cracked, I had brought an egg with me. It was actually a boiled egg, but I got a little hungry between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., so I ate Humpty. Amen, Humpty. But y'all know what a broken egg looks like.
What you came, what you going.
So I can be serious, y'all. But it says that when Humpty fell, he was broken. It says that all the king's horsemen and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. So if an egg is cracked, why would you send horses and the army to restore him? If I'm not mistaken, Brother Moore, the last time that I checked is that the army is destructive and Humpty needed someone who was constructive. And see, that's a problem with a lot of us here on this morning. We got a whole lot of unqualified people trying to put us back together. You calling your friend and they unqualified. As a matter of fact, they just as broken as you. I don't need unqualified people trying to put me together. I don't need the king horseman and the king's man. All I need is King Jesus to come down and put me back together again. If you understood that if it hadn't been for the Lord on your side, you have to ask yourself, well, where would you be? And so all we need is King Jesus to come back and put us back together.